Good morning, Briella. We have one handout.
They still have the Anderson Research Scholarships?
They do, Ray. Yes, they do have the Anderson Research Scholarships. And I think maybe some folks in our room have gotten one, which is pretty neat. Okay, so we're going to do just a little bit of housekeeping, Ray, and you can listen to this. This might sound familiar to you from all those years ago. So anyway, why don't we get started? Good morning, S&P.
Good morning.
Hey, all right. All right. Welcome to the end of week number 12. Who's ready for a weekend? Yay! All right, we're ready for a weekend. All right, and even better news than a weekend. When we come back, we'll have our session on Monday. We'll be talking about speech perception. You can watch our final video of the year for speech perception. And then on Wednesday, the best news of all, we have our next section exam. Let's give it up for the section exam. Yay! All right, so I'm going to say just a little bit about the section exam because you're all pros at this. So here's the details for section exam number 4. And the format is the same as always. The content will be, as usual, our short answer questions. And these are some things that you might want to look over, the videos, the lecture notes, all of that good stuff. Now, the emphasis will be on the material since October 30th. That's when we had our last section exam. So this is available to you on the S Drive and also on Blackboard. So tips on how to practice, what the content will be, and what the format will be. I'll give you one more reminder about this on Monday morning, and then Wednesday we'll have that exam. Okay? One other thing before we get on to our main event, and that is that when Ray was a student way back when, we used to watch a video on Sound and Fury. It was about cochlear implants. Ray, in more recent years, what we've done is we switched to this video which came out a few years back. This is called Here and Now, and I have 5 copies with me today. I'm going to put all 5 copies on reserve at the Doane Library. And for next Friday's class, we'd like you to watch this in advance. Ray, this is a really fun video where people are getting cochlear implants. It's a couple that's congenitally deaf, and they get cochlear implants at age 65. Yeah, good expression, right? Yeah, right. At age 65, they get these cochlear implants, and they have some mixed success. But a charming couple. I think these folks will remind you of your grandparents, and I think you'll enjoy this. We'll have a discussion on that Friday about this. So lots of hearing-related phenomena for next time around. So these will be on reserve in the Doane Library. You can check those out and watch those, and then come in prepared to talk for next Friday. Who's okay with that? Yeah, works for us? Okay, really good. All right, well, I think those are all of the housekeeping items that we have. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome back my friend and the first student I ever met when I was coming to Denison. I was carrying up some books in the stairwell right back here to move into my office, which was then upstairs. And the first student I ran into was Ray Stanley. He was working with Dr. Dow that summer, if I recall correctly, as an Anderson Scholar. Is that right? Okay, so he was doing a summer scholarship, and we just happened to pass each other, and he said, hey, I have you, and you're the new guy, I have you in S&P in a couple of weeks or something like that. And so he was the first student that I ever ran into, and then he was in this class in 2001, and then Ray and I did summer research together the following summer, and we published a paper together, the paper that you've read for today. After that, Ray went on. Well, I won't give you all of his biography. I think maybe he wants to do that. But I'm just delighted to have my student back here. Can we all have a warm round of applause for Ray Stanley?
Happy to be here.
Okay, all right. And I also have Ray, I'll see if I can get them up simultaneously. I also have the Ray Stanley PowerPoint. And I got a big kick out of this. He recalled the color scheme that we've had since 2001, and he wanted to, yeah.
Same color scheme. Okay, I wasn't sure if it changed.
Nope.
PowerPoint always changes, so it's hard to keep the same design.
Right.
But yeah, I recalled it was that memorable for me. It's been 12 years since I've looked at an S&P slide. I remember the color format, very visible.
Okay. Just as a little sound check, I wonder if we can have Kirsten or Molly say hello from the back, just to see if Ray can hear what you're saying from the back.
Hello.
Hi, I can hear you.
Okay, all right, that works. So it sounds like our microphone is multi-directional. Would you like to start us out, Ray, or I'm not sure how to begin? Yeah, okay, so I've got your first slide, Life After S&P.
Yeah, next slide.
Okay, what else is there, right? Okay, here's our overview.
For me, S&P was a big it was a big, sort of a life-changing. So I'm happy with it. So in terms of what I thought to talk about today, I wanted to just tell you who I am so that you understand where I'm coming from. And then I thought, of course, we would talk some about the article. And we don't necessarily have to spend 20 minutes, but I want to make sure Nestor gets the time that he needs to talk about that topic. And then I have lots of projects I've done since Denison and since my S&P class where I use information I learned in S&P. So I thought I could share some of that.
Okay.
And I thought with whatever time is left, you can ask me whatever questions you would like about life after Denison, Dr. Matthews' vegan jersey, or anything like that.
Right.
Next slide.
All right, we're up to our next slide. This is slide 3. We're with you.
All right, so I graduated from Denison in 2003, and I had stepped through quite a few majors. I don't remember all of them, but a lot. I wanted to be a high school math teacher, and then I didn't like calculus, and then I wanted to be an English teacher, and I didn't like literary critique. And so I went through a lot of different things before I found psychology. And going into the S&P class, I thought that I wanted to be in the service end of psychology. So I thought I wanted to be some sort of counselor.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And over winter break, after S&P, I did an internship type thing in that area, and discovered that that wasn't as good a fit for me as doing research. And when I went into that internship, neck and neck were the service aspect of psychology, of that, and the other option was being just like Dr. Matthews, doing research in psychophysics. And so what gave me that idea was the S&P class. So I really enjoyed learning about how systematic you can be about studying human behavior. And I like technical stuff. I like engineering and computers and all that. And it was really the first time I had seen psychology in that light as a way to express your technology and engineering type skills to understand human behavior. And an important part of my Denison experience was the Anderson Research Scholarships. I did one that summer where I met Dr. Matthews in the hallway, and then I did another one that was with Dr. Dow, and then I did one that summer, which resulted in the article with Dr. Matthews, and then I did one the year after that, where we did some more auditory motion stuff. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of things I remember about S&P, but I thought I'd share at least 3. The first is red is in the head. You still tell them that?
Oh, yeah, right? Okay. The red's in the head, right? Yeah.
Billy Wooten or something?
Oh, wow. Billy Wooten, who retired fairly recently. But yes, good of you to recall. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's a clever phrase, but I guess what was exciting to me was what that phrase meant, which was that we create so much of our world. It's easy to think that everything is measurable in the world, and reality is what you can measure with physical devices. And I think what I really learned in sensation and perception was that our brain creates the world based on a given physical stimulus. And we see color because of wavelength. And it's our brain makes the color. There is no color in wavelength. So that was really important to me. We had to write out the definition of psychophysics on every test.
No, I don't do that. But they were exposed to the definition of psychophysics. But yeah, I guess I got tired of reading that definition after all the years. So
yeah. So the result of having to write it out for every test was that I still roughly remember it. It stuck with me. And then the other thing was the one-of-a-kind test. When I took the test in Dr. Matthews' class, I found that the tests were often learning experiences. I took knowledge that I had learned in the class or in the reading, and then learn something by answering the test question. And one question in particular that I remember, I was just thinking this morning, was about Britney Spears, and it was just after her Video Music Awards performance of Slave for You with the yellow and white python. So that tells you how creative Dr. Matthews can be.
That one has since been replaced, unfortunately. Went the way of the psychophysics definition, I think. So, but anyway, we try to put other ones in there. All right, really good. Are we on to slide 4? This is the post-Denison overview. Is that where we are, or something?
So I figured that I was going to be. I wanted to keep on doing the type of research that I've been doing with Dr. Matthews, and that traditionally is done in the context of an academic environment, an academic institution. Then I started freaking out right around graduation. It happens to most people, probably happened to you. And I decided I'm not sure if I'm okay with the lack of structure in academia for my personality. And I really wanted there to be some structure of like a 9-to-5 environment, of bookends on my life, because I had a lot of outside interests, and I still do. I have less time, but I still have all the interests. And so I said, I'm actually kind of thinking about maybe something where I can use my brain, but it's 9 to 5, like maybe some sort of accounting. And Dr. Matthews said, no, please no. He said, well, if you're interested in industry and structure, I have this friend that I used to call What a Maniac.
Oh yeah, yeah, right.
At Wright Pat, and he told me about the field of human factors, and it really appealed to me. And human factors is basically taking psychology and applying it to design. So taking what we know about how people see and hear and make decisions and applying it to design, so that we understand, so that things are easier to use and safer and things like that.
By the way, if I can interrupt just for a second, What a Maniac is still at Wright Pat, and for those of us who don't know, Wright Pat is the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and feel free to interrupt me anytime.
Oh, sure.
Anybody.
Yeah, anybody, just chime in. Yeah.
So after that, I went to Human Factors program at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia, and got a doctorate in what they called engineering psychology, which is essentially another name for human factors. And my research was on bone conduction hearing. So it turns out if you take sound is made in the air by vibrating some sort of medium, and it causes compressions and rarefactions in air molecules. Turns out you can take some more solid vibrating object and put it on your head, and it can send compressions and rarefactions through all the stuff inside of your head, your bone, your tissue, and it eventually gets to your hearing sensory organ, your cochlea. So that's what I studied in graduate school, and then I did a postdoc at Brandeis where I did speech comprehension and aging. So I'm interested in here and now. And then in the last couple of years, I've been working for the MITRE Corporation, which is a systems engineering firm based out of Washington, D.C. I lived in Washington, D.C. for a year and a half, and now I live up in Akron, Ohio, as a teleworker. So I frequently am in this situation where I'm on the phone or on the video to do work. And so now I help design air traffic control systems with air traffic controllers and systems engineers.
All right.
And the reason I did the postdoc was I was having a lot of trouble still deciding whether I wanted to go into academia or not. And for a variety of reasons, what seemed to work best for us was for me to go into industry. And at Georgia Tech, I met my wife, and I had a child at Brandeis, and then I had another child with MITRE. So
Wow.
my wife is a professor at University of Akron in psychology. Grad school is a good place to meet others.
The majority of my friends who are married found their significant other in graduate school. Yeah.
If graduate school was right for you, you wouldn't believe once you get there how much you have in common with everyone else. It's pretty cool.
All right, great.
Next slide.
All right, are we up to number 4? I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, that was number 4. Are we up to the article already?
Yeah, the article.
Okay. All right. So here's where students can chime in if they'd like, or I don't know if you want to give us some context, or if we want the students to give us.
I did some just like
Okay, sure.
How, at least in my head, how we sort of came up with the idea.
Okay.
I knew I liked psychophysics, but I also know that I was really into all the hearing research because I'm an avid music listener, and I had just gotten some new sort of like digital processing box for my stereo that simulated sounds coming from different places in space, and I thought I was kind of inspired by that, and I wanted to investigate something to do with the spatial aspects of sound. And Dr. Matthews, at least at that time, was doing a lot of research on visual motion.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, why don't we try something with auditory motion?
Yeah. Cool. I had forgotten that's how we got there, but that is how we I think I was trying to push you toward visual motion, and you correctly resisted and said we did. All right.
So that's the general context. And a couple other interesting things that I learned during the study. I learned, since I wasn't real good at calculus and some of those kinds of things, I didn't think I would necessarily be a computer science type person. But what I discovered in doing the study was a skill and a love for programming. So that was a really cool experience, even though I guess all you get out of the article is that we did it in MATLAB, but that was a big part of doing the study for me.
Uh-huh.
And I encourage anyone who has interest in research to do the Anderson Scholarship Program, because it's a really good way to learn how to do research. And a lot of other people, if you do end up, if you feel like going to grad school, a lot of other people don't have those kind of opportunities to do independent research like that by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
At the bigger institutions, people are coming in and all they've done is run participants.
Yeah. Well, just by a show of hands, has somebody here done, I think we have a few Anderson or summer researchers. I think we've had a few summer researchers here. You can't see this, Ray, but we have a room full of about maybe 12 or 13 people signed up for this 8:30 class, and 3 of the 13 have their hands up. So we've had a good number of folks doing research here, and maybe some others will do it in summers to come. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's all the context.
Great,
Yeah.
great, really good. I wonder if we might have, we've asked students to read through and maybe come up with some vocabulary or some comments about the article. I've also got the PDF. I'm going to try to flash it now. And I think good. We have your face, Ray, in a couple of different places. There's the big picture of Ray, and then there's a smaller one. And I do have enough room to get the smaller Ray Stanley and the article up here. So why don't we see if students have any kind of question or comment about the article, and either Ray and I might try to respond to this. They're flipping through their pages, Ray.
Yeah.
We also asked them to maybe identify some vocabulary. By the way, Ray, the going rate for pay around here is still $10 for the hour, so it hasn't changed yet.
Come on. That used to be good money.
It used to be good money. Now it's kind of mediocre money, but that hasn't changed in this interval.
Nice round number.
Becca has a question for us.
I just wasn't sure, what, auditory motion after effects would be like.
Okay.
Sort of like a context for that.
Okay. Do you want to give us so the question again was, what are auditory motion after effects? I can respond to that, Ray, unless you want to give it a shot. Doesn't matter to me.
I think I'm going to let you go on.
Okay, right. So you might imagine that we can have a visual motion after effect, and the idea would be that we show you some stimuli that are falling down and down and down, and then we show you a stationary stimulus. And the after effect would be opposite in direction. So you'd see the stationary stimulus, but it would tend to float up a little bit mysteriously. Even Aristotle himself noticed this. He noticed that if you look at the water running along a river, and you're looking then up at the bank will seem to move opposite to the direction of the river, even though you know that the bank is stationary. A bunch of rocks are not moving. Who's okay with the visual after effect? Okay? So the same thing is true now if we have an auditory stimulus. And what we used to do, I think when Ray was in the class, and I think we've done it a few times, we've asked you to close your eyes and point to me as I move around the room. Have we done that one yet? Okay, we have done that one. So you can imagine that we can have a whole stream of people coming by. Everybody's moving from the window side of the room to the door side of the room. So that would be the audience's right side. And we can just keep on bringing all these stimuli that are rightward in their direction of motion. Then we give you a stationary stimulus, kind of like my voice right now, is coming from just one position. And it will seem to be moving leftward. Okay, so the same kind of effect, but now it's just happening in the auditory domain. Who's following that explanation? Does that work for us? Okay. One other one that Ray may or may not remember, but it's also the case that you can do this with frequency sweeps. Ray, earlier this week we read the Dawkins chapter on bats, and we talked about chirps. Remember the chirp and the chirp sonar, and they could use that. If you listen to a bunch of chirps that are downward swooping, I'll try to whistle that. And then you hear a solid tone. If you listen to enough downward chirps, you'll hear some upward modulation in the frequency. So this can happen both in space and also in the frequency domain. There are frequency after effects, which are kind of cool. So that's what the motion after effect was. Does that help, Becca?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay, really good. Other questions about vocabulary or things that you found interesting, other comments people have? Okay, Emily's got one. Thank you, Emily.
I noticed that you chose to go with IIDs instead of ITDs because you said that humans are more sensitive to IIDs.
Okay.
I was just wondering what the experiment kind of would have looked like if you chose to go with ITDs.
Okay, yeah, so we did use IIDs rather than ITDs. Allegedly, we're more sensitive to IIDs. I also have to confess here, and Ray's probably smiling, I think we didn't know how to pull off the ITDs, right? Because Ray spent a good portion of his senior research trying to do the head-related transfer function.
That's right.
we tried to get a mannequin. So first, who remembers IID and ITD from an earlier conversation? Okay, so we tried to get to something like an ITD, but then we weren't sure how to actually program that. That was one other issue that we had. I would like to think, Emily, that it would be similar. We'd get similar kinds of results, unless we want to argue that attention has one effect on IIDs and attention has a very different effect on ITDs, and that could be the case. Right? It's an empirical question, so it's a good question that you ask, but I think that I would be a little surprised if they were fundamentally different in that way. But yeah.
And the IID and the ITD is something really interesting. It's another one of those sort of red in the head things, because ITDs are on the order of microseconds.
Yeah.
And so you delay time of arrival of sound between the ears on the order of microseconds, and you get the perception of space. When you start delaying it by milliseconds or seconds, then you get the perception of sequence. So it's another one of those things where, you know, a single physical dimension, your brain creates different things out of it depending on where in that range of the physical dimension you are.
Yeah. And thank you for making that point, Ray. So there's that trade-off between having the ITDs, a difference in time, being misconstrued by the brain, if you will, as a difference in space. But it turns out to be a very functional misconstrual, right? So that we can recover where things are positioned in space by having this difference in time. Can anybody from the class, or Ray, if you'd like, can anybody remember another example where we had this time-space trade-off? Yeah, go ahead, Owen. The Pulfric effect, right? That swinging pendulum kind of a thing, and then we looked at it with, I think we did that our first year. We look at it through the filtered eye and the other eye, and we get this three-dimensionality, right? So if we can fool the brain into thinking there's a time difference, sometimes the brain will give us the perceptual effect of maybe a depth difference, or at least a spatial difference, even if it's generated by a time difference. Okay? Great, thank you, Emily. Other questions or comments about any aspect of this? We'll go with Kirsten, all the way in the back.
You talked about the methods about ramped or damped for the control condition.
Yeah.
What exactly did you have to do? What exactly would that mean?
Great. Well, thank you for picking up on that. So the question again, if you couldn't hear that, Ray, was ramps and damps, right? You and I talked about ramps and damps in the paper. And Kirsten's question is, how do we do that in the control condition? Or why perhaps do we do that in the control condition? Would you like to pick up on that, or would you like me to?
I'll give it a shot.
Oh, right, okay.
So I'll start with why we would do that. So the ramps and damps were necessary. It's just for creating the percept of sound traveling through space. So it's sort of a ramp and a damp can be thought of as a dynamically changing IID. So the relative difference between the ears is changing over time, and that's what's causing that ramp and damp. And the reason that it was important to do in the control condition was, in the control condition, you want to have everything the same except the variable of interest. And we could have just done a steady state tone, but then you could make that judgment of motion or no motion just with one ear. Because if you had an ear that didn't work, then you could just say, whenever I hear an increase in intensity, it doesn't even have to be spatial. If I just have one ear, all it's going to sound like is an increase in intensity. So, ooh, like all you're going to hear is an increase in intensity. And so it was important to make a control stimulus that if you use one ear, you would have the same performance. Not because we expected to have people with one ear, but we wanted to isolate our variable of interest and make sure there was no way to, quote, cheat.
Does that help, Kirsten, or are we still a little unclear? That helps? Okay, really good. Thank you for the question, Kirsten. I think Harshita had a hand up, and then Becca has another question. So we'll go with Harshita first, and then Becca.
What is dialectical and dichotic?
Yeah, so diotic and dichotic, right? Those are some big phrases that Ray, I was stumbling over them. I actually don't use them in class that much, but thank you for asking about that. Do you want to handle that, Ray, or would you like me to handle that? Okay.
I remember that.
He got it better than I did. Right? Ray tuned into that much more quickly than I tuned into that. So yeah.
So that's that actually, I believe the first time that was done was with some historic experiments in the 1950s that were used to make conclusions about attention as a whole. So a very not sensation of perception, very much an above sensation of perception type phenomenon. Cherry in the 1950s.
Okay.
And then Cocktail Party effect. Sorry, I should mention that. Let's have time to explain it all. I won't. Okay, so the diotic and dichotic is a way to say whether or not two ears have the same stimulus or a different stimulus, even if it's a tiny little difference. Mm-hmm. So diotic means the same, both ears get the same stimulus, and it's both ears. So it's binaural, and it's diotic. Very subtle difference. I have no idea where the actual word comes from. And then dichotic just means that the two ears, what's arriving at the two ears, differs in some way. And it's important for headphones because in the natural world, what arrives at the two ears is always different.
Yeah.
Because of just the physics of the natural world. But when you have headphones, you can make these strange, you can make all kinds of sounds that don't really have natural correlates. And so with headphones, we specify diotic, which means same exact thing sent to both cans, and dichotic, which is something a little bit different sent to the two different ears, or a lot different.
That sounds great. Really clear explanation. And I'm also projecting something that you probably can't see, Ray. I'm projecting figure 2 from our article. And there's a very nice picture that you probably drew, if I recall. So let me just see if I can make this really clear and offer the folks a picture along with the description that you just gave. So diotic is on the left, and hopefully people can see that the right ear and the left ear are each receiving a ramp. Is that okay? And when we say ramp, what we mean is that the amplitude is increasing. The amplitude is ramping up, the sound is ramping up. Who's okay with that? Left and right ears are getting the same thing. We call that diotic. That's a fancy word. Dichotic, very similar sounding, but now we're going to get something different in the left and right ears. Same ramp in the left ear as always, but now the right ear is damping down. That is to say that the amplitude is getting less over time. Who's seeing that? We've got a ramp in one ear and a damp in the other. This will typically give you motion, and this one won't. This will just sound like it's getting louder, but it won't give you motion. But what's cool is there's always some amplitude modulation in any of these conditions. So if you listen with just one ear, you really can't tell whether there is any kind of motion or not. You really do need to combine information from the two ears, and that's what we would typically do in order to take advantage of these interaural intensity differences. Please go ahead, Marcia.
So was this kind of a control?
Yes, this is a control, right? This is the control that we've been referring to earlier. Great. Right. Okay, thank you. And then I think Becca had a question or comment.
Yeah, you guys talked in the discussion a little bit further about the motion detection thresholds and how you guys did that for clearly audible stimuli. And I was just wondering how including low contrast, if you will, or not clearly audible stimuli, or just a range of audible stimuli would have affected the ability to measure thresholds, or if that's relevant.
Okay. Okay. I think I've got that. And I don't know if you want to take a shot at that, Ray, or if you want me to. Okay. All right. So one of the things that we found is, first, Ray did some work at Brandeis University. Ray, when you were there, were you down the hall from Bob Sekuler by any chance? Or did you run into Bob Sekuler?
He was in a different building.
Oh, my goodness.
We were, but I did run into him occasionally.
Okay, so getting back to Becca's question, we were talking in the discussion session about how it is the case that our results were fairly similar to what you would find in visual experiences rather than auditory experiences, but there were a couple of differences that we had. And we said, well, in addition to the fact that our stimuli were auditory and Bob Sekuler's stimuli were visual, ours were really very easily heard, and theirs were right at threshold. And sometimes the nervous system does operate a little bit differently right at threshold. You have many fewer neurons kicking in at that time, and you have many more neurons when you're above threshold, supra-threshold, as we would say. And that doesn't necessarily guarantee that there will be differences, but there could be, right? There are neurologically different levels of activity when you're way above threshold than when you're right at the margin. So we thought that might be one of the reasons why we could explain perhaps some of the differences that we might see. Okay, and so Bob Sekuler, by the way, you might not know this, he wrote most of what you have in your course pack. Much of the textbook readings come from Blake and Sekuler, and it's Bob Sekuler who I almost did my postdoc with at Brandeis University, and then Ray did his postdoc at Brandeis. Oh, Susan Kennedy is waving. Dr. Kennedy is, come on in. let's bring her in.
I've never Skyped. Hi, Ray.
Hi!
How are you?
Can you come on over here just to...
God, how old must I be if you were already...
Come on over here. So just so he just wants to see you, I'm sure. So you can say hi.
Hey, how are you? Now, do you have a baby?
I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old.
Oh my God! Congratulations! Wow. I'll let you get back to the
SMV stuff.
eye or whatever.
We're in
Good to see
the
you,
ear.
Bye. The ear. Okay.
I'm sure Dr. Hudson Como would want to say hello also, but she's doing the stats class. You had Dr. Snyder for stats, right?
I had Dr. Snyder for one and Dr. Hudson Como for another.
Oh, okay. All right. So she's next door doing that in the same room as always. All right. So where were we? We were talking about Bob Sekuler and low contrast and all of that good stuff. Okay. Other questions or comments or vocabulary? Anything along these lines? It's a fairly simple idea, right? Does this high-level effect of attention alter our low-level motion sensitivity? And we did find that we can throw it off. If you get some bad information, it screws up your capacity to tell that motion was even present there. Kirsten's got another one for us, and then Harsha's got one for us.
I don't know if I just missed this in the article, but what in like the last 2 paragraphs you talked about NAEs.
Okay.
What does that stand for?
Yeah, again, that was a motion after effect, and so that was right. That was the question that Becca had talked about. That's this thing about you adapt to one direction, either visually or auditorily, and you get the opposite direction after that. That's we probably only defined it once, and then we go crazy with the acronyms.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, and then Harshida.
In government work too, it can be frustrating because I'll often have to read a 200-page document, and the acronym will be like defined on the page 8. The other 100.
Uh-oh. I think we just lost the auditory. Let's see how we're doing. Can you say something else?
Can you hear me now?
Ah, okay, it's back. We just momentarily dipped out. I think the government found out you were talking about them, and they
Yes,
they shut you down. Okay, Harshida's got one for us.
So I just want to make sure I know what you guys did.
Yeah.
Basically, they had headphones on.
Okay.
You would do the ramping and damping.
Yep.
And just before that, you play a cue that said the motion is going to be this way.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was Ray's voice that went something like start end? Is that what we did? So we had start in one ear and we had end in the other ear, and that was the clue. And the reason we did that was we could have said this is going to be rightward motion or leftward motion. Some people are not good with their rights and lefts, so
That's every trial.
yeah, right. So we had Ray's voice in one ear, and then the other ear start and end or start and end. And then you had to confirm the cue, and they had to hit an arrow key, right? We didn't even have them hit the right and left, okay, so that they could just say it went that way or that way, and that way we knew that they picked up Ray's cue. And now the question is, having been given Ray's cue, can you detect the motion if it's there, right?
Were they told that they should use it as a clue?
Yes, and I think we told them, we might have even said it in the article and I'm remembering, I think we told them that the cue is, I don't think we told them it was always correct. I think we told them it would provide information about it.
I think we told them that you would be best served listening to the cue, but that it's not always right. So if you listen to the cue, you'll do better, but it's not always going to be right.
And then we had the one...
80-20 or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, usually, so we jimmied the statistics there so that it would usually be true. And then there was that one person who said, hey, that cue is throwing me off. I don't know if you remember reading that, Ray, but we did have somebody who said he tried to disregard the cue.
It's always one.
Right.
Or a few.
Something else. Other questions or comments about what went on here? All right. Maybe that's enough on the article. Unless you had something else that you wanted to share about the article.
I have one thing I just thought of.
Okay.
Which is that I know that sometimes reading the basic research, it can be hard to figure out how it corresponds to everyday life. So I had kind of a fun thing when I first went into grad school. The lab was doing research on a auditory navigation system for people who could not see, visually impaired or blind people. And one thing that I learned was that people who are visually impaired rely very heavily on using their ears to navigate the world. And in Atlanta, there's a Center for Visually Impaired, and Georgia Tech is in an urban environment, so there are a lot of visually impaired people walking around in the city. And one of the judgments that they had to make was, where is a car? Mm-hmm. And can I cross the street, or am I about to walk off the sidewalk into the car? So I actually, it was just funny in that I started to see how auditory motion, for example, could be useful understanding that phenomenon, besides just for understanding mechanisms of human perception, but that that actual skill could be very useful for someone who's visually impaired. So, for example, the cue, it could be that it's 5 o'clock p.m., and so traffic is going south if you're south of the city. Yeah, so people are leaving the city, right. So you're walking back from work, and so you're expecting most traffic to come towards you, and that could be like, you could think of that as like an attentional cue, mm-hmm. And then judging whether or not some aspect of motion, whether or not it's going to reach you before you cross the street, or whether or not it's moving at all. So I don't know, that's just a thought passing through my head, that there's almost, no matter how basic a research question is, I think there's almost always something that once you think it through, that it correlates to, and that it can tell us about in the quote real world. Yeah, no, it's an important distinction between basic research and applied research. So yeah, thanks for making the point. Great. Okay, all right. So let's see what else we've got going on here. The next bit that I have is, are we up to slide 6, which is graduate school? Yeah, let's just skip some to slide 8, or I think it's 8, the MITRE stuff. Let's go to the MITRE stuff. So we're on slide, hold on, bear with me. I want to make sure people have a chance, if they want to ask just general questions. Okay. I think the stuff I'm doing now is kind of easiest to talk about, and the most demonstrative that I'm still using things that I learned in S&P, working 12 years later in a systems engineering firm. Okay. So MITRE Corporation. It's in Washington, D.C., and they do work with a lot of different government agencies. Everything that I do is with the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. And they have a really difficult charge in modernizing the air traffic control system. You may have heard about in the news, the next-gen system. And MITRE basically helps the government, gives the government the technical guidance, does the research and development to understand how to build the systems. And it's really important that it's done right, because when it's not done right, and this has happened several times with several systems, it costs a lot. So if you don't do the early upfront research correctly, then you make a system, because you can make lots of things, and then you put it in front of controllers and it doesn't do the job that it needs to. So I would say 50% of the work I do right now, I am pretending to be a systems engineer, which I am not. That's okay. I try to pick up what I can from my colleagues that have formal training in it. And the other 50% is more classic sort of human factors things. So I'll do things like do evaluations of prototype systems. So we have an air traffic control tower simulator in a laboratory, and we'll put in front of them a prototype system and measure things like reaction time and accuracy and workload. So that's the human factors type of things. Also doing things like mining literature on successes and failures of human factors in air traffic control systems. So even though half my work has nothing to do with psychology or human factors, all of my contributions where I give them are based on learning how to think in a scientific way. That's when I get put on projects, that's why they want me there, is to be analytical and systematic. And that's because of my training in Denison's psychology department. So, I don't know. I thought that might be interesting to you guys.
All right. Well, thank you for saying that, because we do hope that more than anything, whatever you major in here at Denison, that you come out being a really good critical and analytical thinker. We try to get that in some way in all of our courses. So we're hoping that is a stamp that we can put on our students. They're really good critical thinkers, because we never know what kind of career you're going to be in. You'll probably change careers 4 times, but there'll always be a demand for critical thinkers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the aspects of critical thinking that's come up time and time again is that even really bright systems engineers will look stuff up on Wikipedia, which you guys should know is not a reliable source of information.
I do send them there, so that, I'm part of.
I've looked at Wikipedia before, but
I do. I look at it. I'm a big Wiki fan, and I do like that. It's usually current. It is not always accurate, but it does have some self-correction possibility. But yeah. I hope that.
Example, before I base writing a technical standard, if I'm going to write a technical standard for a system, then I want to find it in a peer-reviewed journal or a standards or government document.
Right.
And I think other people are comfortable with finding it on the internet, and I think part of the scientific training is understanding the value of different sort of publication systems.
Great.
So let's see, where are we going?
So we could roll the clip, but I'm a little. I'm just taking a look at the time. We've got about 8 minutes left, and I wondered if.
29. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
We can. I've shared the most important part about work at MITRE. So
okay.
I use my sensation and perception stuff specifically, and I also just use my general psychology training.
Okay. So I wonder if we might open it up more broadly and see if anybody has a question about really anything. It could be life after Denison. I see June has a hand that's going up. Go ahead, June.
Yeah, so my question is, when you guys are presenting those types of prototypes for the air traffic control system, how often is it that the theories and the general ideas, that it all makes sense on paper, when you try to put it to application, it all doesn't? I can imagine it once an air traffic controller actually gets to the prototype system, that they'll say, this is crap, why did you do this? Now it doesn't make any sense anymore. How much of that is like maybe we really made a mistake versus like maybe the air traffic controller is just really used to the old system, and because he was trained that way, he's like, I'm perfectly functional with this way. If you change it like this, everything's gonna go to hell because we don't know where it is.
Yeah, and air traffic control is a really special domain because these people air traffic controllers do safety critical jobs, right? So they can't mess up. That's certainly the feeling they have. It is unacceptable to make an error. And they do it 8 hours a day. You know, you could find them when they've been doing it for 30 years, and then you're gonna, switch out their keyboard. I guess cheaper, So what you've said is right. There's a big, you have to be careful about, all changes have to be slow. And that's an air traffic control thing. That's not a human factors thing. That's because of the population you're catering to. In terms of theory and then what you see, some theory doesn't work out because of the population. So you may have theory that is applied broadly to all human beings and guidelines about human factors design, but then what trumps all other things is make the smallest change possible, because these people do safety critical jobs looking at the same thing 8 hours a day for years on end. So some of the theory stuff is extremely helpful and saves a lot of time and a lot of money from having to do your own research, and some of it doesn't quite hold up because of the special population.
Yeah, real good. Other general questions about life after Denison or air traffic control or grad school? Or Becca's got something for us.
I just have a life after Denison question, just out of curiosity. Did you, I guess, how much time did you spend, I don't want to say not doing anything, I guess, before going into postgraduate work, or did you just jump right in?
Did you mean postgraduate or post-Denison?
Post-Denison.
Okay, so how much time did you spend after Denison doing other things than graduate school?
So there are two theories about what one should do. And the same can be, some people will apply the same to after high school, although it's pretty unique these days. One theory says you need a break from school and you need to make sure that you have some basis for going into grad school and you have all the information you need, and maybe even save some money. The other theory is that, not scientific, but the popular use of the term theory is that if you stop now, you'll never go back. And I subscribe to the stop now, and I didn't have anything else I wanted to do. I was very unsure about exactly what area I wanted to do, but I was pretty sure I wanted to do something with psychology research, and I had a lot of pressure from my family to figure out what I was doing with my life, and it wasn't acceptable, frankly, to move home for me, and so I had to get my stuff together and figure out what I was doing. And I've seen other people that were able to move home and take their time, and I think that was good for them, and it could have been good for me. But for me, I just felt like I would never go back, and that I had to figure out a place to live and go to work. And I don't know. For me, it seemed right to go straight through, but I don't think that's a requirement.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Briella's got one. Go ahead, Briella.
What was the biggest adjustment between Denison and graduate school?
There were so many. So many. It was such a wake-up call. So here's the thing. Everyone at Denison, I don't know, I'm not there anymore, but my experience was everyone at Denison, especially in the psychology department, was interested in you as a student succeeding and learning and teaching you how to do research. And it turns out that some of the bigger graduate schools attract some different personality types that are a little bit more excited by the idea of being famous for their research. And it's just, I guess I have to say, it's just kind of more, quote, hardcore, which in that people are just, everything I learned at Denison taught me to be extremely rigorous. What I saw and what I saw in friends who went to the bigger research institutions was kind of like, I don't want to deter anyone from going to grad school. It's just that you have to sort of be prepared for people to be kind of, I guess, not as nice is the easiest way to say it. Just a little bit more like, you're a professional, essentially you're a professional, you're on your own, you're here to figure out stuff, and I'll bump you in the right direction as needed. That's the biggest adjustment, and frankly, it was a good adjustment. I mean, that's, I think, also probably what happens when people get their first job if it's not in graduate school, is they realize that there's maybe a bigger span of how people treat each other and looking out for people than maybe what they experienced in college.
Great.
That was my experience. I don't mean to be negative.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time. Can we all have a round of applause for Ray coming in to join us today? Thank you so much, Ray. Means a lot to
us.
us.
Send out my email address. You guys are free to email me us about life after Denison questions, because I know it can be hard to figure out what you want to do. So please feel free to email me and ask me about stuff.
Thanks again, Ray. We'll let you get back to your kids. All right. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. There he goes, off into the ether. Thank you all for a wonderful session. Okay, I hope you'll enjoy the video for Monday. It'll be our last video of the semester. It'll be on Speak for Something. Just a heads up about that. The camera goes out of whack at 2 different points, and then it oozes back in, and then it oozes back out. You can hear my voice the whole time, but you'll see almost nothing on the screen for like a minute, and then it comes back in. So bear with it. It does get better toward the very end. All right, and you've got the PowerPoint lecture notes. Have a great weekend. Look forward to Monday's session. And if you haven't already taken one of these, please do. Please take one of these. This will be for next Friday's session.